So basically, if you've been following my channel, I've been mentioning how there seems to be something that is synced up to my own life, and it seems to be connected a lot to Miami, the Miami Dolphins, the Super Bowl. And the night before, we got this story in regards to the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting, which Fort Lauderdale, pretty much, it's in the same area as Miami and whatever. The night before that, I even made a post, and I talked about, I'm going to go back and re-explain all of this stuff, but I even mentioned, well, that isn't in the right post. I mentioned how there's this interesting connection with my uncle and my cousin and Fred Flintstone, and I said his brother even lives in Pembroke Pines, which is a suburb of Miami. Then the very next day, we get this shooting at the airport, and he lives literally, 10 minutes away, if that. I talked about all this Key of David stuff and all this key symbolism. The very next day, we got the death in the mainstream media of Keon Carpenter, and Jesus was the carpenter. He was supposed to have the Key of David, the key on the carpenter. So let's go. I just want to show one more thing, and then I'm going to go back and try to re-explain a lot of what I was talking about and how it all fits in. I just want to show you the map here. My computer is going super duper slow, so we'll see if it loads. Here's Pembroke Pines right here. Here's where the Miami Dolphins play. And here is where this airport shooting supposedly happened. So, just pretty interesting. I didn't even realize that my cousin actually lived that close to where the Dolphins play. And it says that it's only 16.0 miles from this Fort Lauderdale airport to where the Dolphins play. And yesterday was January 6th, 1/6, or 6/1. So this was 16 miles away on 1/6. Fort Lauderdale and Gematria even equals 61. You remember, January 6th can be written 6/1. Thinking about it too, we also had the death of Jose Fernandez, the Miami Marlin player, who wore number 16, and his name equals 142 in Gematria, and Fort Lauderdale equals 142, Miami Dolphins equal 142. If you write out the word 16 in Gematria, 16 equals 42, and if you write out 42, it equals 142. So, I'll get back to this. There are some interrelated things going on with it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's been going on in the media, too. Ever since Colin Kaepernick didn't stand during the national anthem and whatnot, that's been a huge piece or a huge key to the puzzle that's been going on all season. And remember, Colin Kaepernick there was an article about Colin Kaepernick and how he was making pro-Castro comments, and it was making all the Miami Dolphins fans mad when he was in town to play the Miami Dolphins. Cuba equals 27, Miami equals 27. Talk about how it stems clear back to the death of Nebraska punter Sam Foltz, who wore number 27. And I guess the reason I bring this back up is because some of the stories that we got in the media were all connected to the national anthem and whatnot. And so the story we got on New Year's Eve about Mariah Carey lip singing at the syncing or whatever at the New Year's Eve thing. The reason that that's so significant is because Mariah Carey sang the national anthem in the Super Bowl just after 9/11, where the New England Patriots came out of nowhere and won the Super Bowl. Mariah Carey was the one who sang the national anthem that year. And at the end of this article on CNN, they even tell us that this wasn't the first time that a celebrity had messed up or whatever. There was also the goof with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake at the Super Bowl. Now, why would they even mention that in this article in regards to Mariah Carey? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever that they would bring that up, considering this had nothing to do with football whatsoever. So why would they bring up that one little story about Janet Jackson and her boob getting shown? And then, just days later, we get a story about Janet Jackson in the media becoming a mom at the age of 50. And the reason Janet Jackson sticks out is because the Janet Jackson-Justin Timberlake thing, that actually happened in Super Bowl 38 when the Patriots also won the Super Bowl. So then I thought to myself, let's look up Super Bowl 39 and let's see who did the national anthem and who did the halftime show and whatnot. The halftime show just so happened to be by Paul McCartney in Super Bowl 39. And the same day we got this Janet Jackson story, we got a story about Charlie Manson being hospitalized. And what sticks out about that is a big thing with Charlie Manson was his helter-skelter theory. You know, it's talking about the blacks are going to rise up and kill the whites and they're going to hide underground. And then when it's time, they're going to come back up and kill all the blacks because they're too stupid or whatever. That's his theory, the helter-skelter theory. And it was based off of a lot of the Beatles' White Album. And that song, Helter Skelter, was actually written by Paul McCartney. So they did a little sneaky way of showing us the Super Bowls with the Patriots in them. And I'm not going to go through and reread all of these posts, but I just wanted to make a point that all of this is synced up to the Patriots winning Super Bowl 36, 37, and 39. That's why these three stories came out right around the same time. This one involved New Year's Eve that equals 142, like Miami Dolphins. Charles Manson equals 142 in Gematria. And if you don't know what I'm talking about in regards to Gematria, I'll leave a link in the description. How to Gematria, watch that video. You'll completely understand a lot more of what I'm talking about. And I'll leave other links as well, because there's a lot to follow and a lot of things that I've talked about. There's an absolute, 300,000 page essay I could write on some of the stuff that I'm talking about, It's just never ending. There's so much information of all these interrelated things. And possibly all of this is for the New England Patriots to be in the Super Bowl. But there's so many things that are interrelated, it just makes me wonder. I'm still trying to figure out the puzzle. I talked about how it's possibly for the Miami Dolphins, which, I think that it is, but it also makes me wonder because there's too many things pointing to Miami. It seems like they're using Miami a lot more. But in a minute, I'm going to explain a few more thoughts I have in regards to this, because possibly they're doing something with the age of Aquarius, and think about the Miami Dolphins and the water and aqua, their color. And I talked about that. Aqua or teal was the color in the Alton Sterling Philando Castile shootings. There's a whole lot of stuff that seems to be pointing to Jesus symbolism. A lot of 318s that are going around, and in the New Testament it even mentions the second coming of Jesus Christ 318 times. And then we have the movie Oblivion that hints that 2017 will be the last Super Bowl. I don't think the movie actually says that there's going to be destruction at the Super Bowl. I have to go back and rewatch it, but they just mentioned that that's where the last Super Bowl was played. So, I don't think there's going to be some big terrorist attack at the Super Bowl. Possibly that could happen or something like. But I think they're just maybe saying this might be the last Super Bowl due to things that might happen in 2017 after that. Or, I don't know. I didn't rewatch the movie. But it could be something like that. And in regards to that, think about it. The Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. The Packers were in the first Super Bowl, but so were the Kansas City Chiefs. So possibly they would do something weird like that and have the Packers play the Chiefs again in the Super Bowl, the first and the last. The Chiefs fit all the Native American theme that I've talked about a lot. And possibly it's all just interrelated into Miami because of Aqua and the age of Aquarius. The Kansas City Chiefs even have ties to the Mormon religion. Alex Smith played for Utah. Andy Reid, went to college at BYU, right? All to do with the Mormons. The Mormons believe that the Native Americans are actually from Jerusalem. They believe that they came here years ago and then they split off into sections, and some of them quit believing in Jesus Christ and whatever else. And can't remember what they're even called. The Nephites and the Lamanites and whatever. The Native American people became the ones who went away from Jesus or God. And of course, the Mormon stuff even connects to the area that I live, because in Council Bluffs, Iowa, that used to be called Canesville, that is the famous starting point of the Mormon Trail. And in the game where Colin Kaepernick first knelt, that was against the Green Bay Packers, and the leading receiver for the Green Bay Packers was Geronimo Allison. Think about Geronimo in regards to George Bush's grandpa, Prescott Bush, and the Skull and Bones Society, and they supposedly stole the bones of Geronimo, the Native American. I talked about Geronimo Allison last year in regards to the Nebraska Cornhuskers, but he also, before he went to Illinois, he went to Iowa Western University, which is in Council Bluffs, the starting point of the Mormon Trail. And the reason that they came to Council Bluffs was because of an illegal treaty signed by the chief of the Omaha Indians, and the town that I live in was responsible for killing the last keeper of the sacred pole. And Chief Yellow Smoke goes back to Prince's Yellow Cloud guitar. So much. I mean, we even got the story about Macy's, the store, closing down. Or they're closing 68 stores. The town I live in is Dunlap. Dunlap equals 68. They killed Yellow Smoke in the year 68. Then the whole town was saved by Freemasons. How interesting is that? You know, and the tribal headquarters of the Omaha people just so happens to be in Macy, Nebraska. And I talked about the Minnesota Mall stabbing, where the perpetrator died in Macy's, and then there was the Washington Mall shooting just after that, and that was also in Macy's. And I talked about all the Thanksgiving stuff in regards to that because of the Macy's Day Parade. But then I started thinking about how Thanksgiving is really just possibly telling us about the key and the key symbolism because of Turkey. And then we've got all these attacks in Turkey. Turkey was the first country to recognize ISIS as a terrorist group. So anyway, hopefully you're still with me. I know I could explain this better, but it's just so much information. I'm not the type of person that can organize it that well as a speaker. You can come to my blog and probably read what I'm writing and understand it a little bit better. But sometimes when I present it, I feel like I explain it a little bit better. But at the same time, it's just so much that some people just can't wrap their brain around it too. And of course, I'll leave a link to my blog in the description as well. I mean, a lot of times I post a lot of blog posts that I don't even talk about. So lately I've just been putting so much information out. I'm trying to piece it all together and then make a video explaining how all of these stories are interrelated, which they truly are. Well, let's start with this Hoboken, where we had the new train wreck that was in New York. And the reason this sticks out so much is because of the Hoboken train wreck. And if you recall, the Hoboken train wreck, when I made that video, that was the video where I said, I've been following all of this stuff for a really long time, and all of this stuff syncs up to what I'm talking about with the Native American theme. I think that it's going to be the Cubs and the Indians in the World Series, all because of the Hoboken train wreck. The reason that it was so significant was because the same day as the Hoboken train wreck, we got the Chicago Cubs got a tie. They tied the Pittsburgh Pirates, and it was the first time that there was a tie in Major League Baseball since the year 2005. And in 2005, the Houston Astros tied the Cincinnati Reds 114 days before they went to the World Series and lost to the Chicago White Sox, who hadn't been or won the World Series in 88 seasons. Curse of the Billy Goat equaled 88. Talked about a lot of Back to the Future stuff and a lot of 88 stuff in regards to the Chicago Cubs, Back to the Future, time travel, 88 miles an hour. The Steve Bartman incident was all about 88. It was even after that, the Marlins came back and got 8 runs in the 8th inning or something like that. I can't even remember it all. I'll post the video to that link as well. Tons of 88. I even talked about the voice of Bart Simpson, and her birthday just so happened to be, she turned 57 the day that the World Series began this year. If you write out World Series the small way equals 57, and it was connected to the Bart series when the Giants played the A's in 1989, the Earthquake World Series. Anyway, in the Hoboken Trainwreck story, they made sure to let us know there was 114 people injured. I talked about how the Cubs tied that day, and the last time there was a tie, Houston made the World Series, but that tie happened 114 days before the World Series began. The Cubs were in their 114th season being called the Cubs, and they won Game 7 on their 114th win of the season. A whole lot of 114 stuff. And even like World War equals 114, Holocaust 114, Pearl Harbor 114. But I was pretty sure that it was synced up to that. And then the Cubs tied Pittsburgh. If you write out Pittsburgh Pirates, it equals 228. And I talked all about Lou Boudreau in the 1948 World Series for the Cleveland Indians and how he was the coach of the Chicago Cubs in 1960. And that was the year of the curse of Rocky Colavito. And Rocky Colavito got traded to Detroit for Harvey Kuhn, or however you say the guy's name. And that guy even played 57 career games with the Cubs. He died on 2/28, a lot like 228, of the year 1988, which was also the exact day that Aroldis Chapman was born. And then Aroldis Chapman got traded to the Cubs 148 days after his birthday. Cleveland Indians equal 148. And this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about. The Cubs were also cursed because of Detroit. And then the curse of Rocky Colavito also involved Detroit. But Detroit didn't win the World Series. There was just things that were connected to Detroit that led me to believe that it was for the Indians and the Cubs. But there was a lot of Detroit stuff going on in the media at that time as well. Or maybe not even a lot of Detroit stuff, but there was just a lot of things that had the same type of numbers, like 91 is Detroit. So, and then, of course, Chicago Cubs equal 91. Just lots of interrelated events that all led it up to that. It just takes time. Sometimes you don't figure out what the exact point is until 2-3 months afterwards, you know? Possibly, if it's not like the Dolphins and the Packers in the Super Bowl, and right now in my head, that's what I think it might be, but it possibly could not be that whatsoever. Possibly there's a piece to the puzzle I'm not seeing, and maybe this summer, maybe in the upcoming summer, I'll be like, oh man, that is what they were doing, and I'll figure it out, put it all together. Sometimes it just takes that long, you know? Sometimes I can do it before, sometimes I can't. And it seems like the only sport that I struggle with is the NFL, which, who knows? I don't even watch baseball. That one seems like it's the easiest one to figure out. But anyway, let's move on then so you understand the point of what I was talking about with the Hoboken train wreck and how I was pretty sure by following a bunch of stories that led up to it that it was going to be the Indians and the Cubs. And we also, I guess, we had a Long Island train wreck on 10/8 this year. And the World Series was all about 108 with the Cubs. Even the trade, the curse of Rocky Colavito, happened on the 108th day of the year. The Willis Tower at Chicago, 108 stories tall. The Cubs hadn't won in 108 years. The curse of the Billy Goat happened on October 8th, 10/8. The Great Chicago Fire happened on 10/8, 145 years ago. If you write out Chicago, Illinois, it equaled 145. Lots of 108 stuff. So interesting, there was also a train wreck in New York on 10/8, which just so happens to also be, it was 88 days before this train wreck, this newest one that we got. Span of 88 days. Remember, Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88. Anyway, another odd thing that happened was I only covered and talked about 2 NFL games this whole season in regards to the actual games. And this is just a weird thing because I actually watched this game, and that was one of the only games I watched all season. The same day as the Hoboken train wreck, the Miami Dolphins lost to the Cincinnati Bengals. And this was a Thursday. The last time that these two teams played each other was a Thursday night. It was the day that after the game, Richie Incognito got suspended for the bullying scandal that I talked about a whole lot because of the year 13 and whatnot. Interesting about the score, 7-22. 7 divided by 22 just so happens to be 0.318, which is a number that I've talked about a whole lot in regard to the Miami Dolphins and Jesus Christ. It's even synced up to the royal family, Princess Diana dying on August 31st, 31/8. King Charles, his birthday in a non-leap year is the 318th day of the year, he used to be married to Princess Diana. And what's even more interesting about that is that Diana died in the year 97, and this year in the NFL there was 2 ties. And that was the first time it happened since the year 1997. And think about what I just said about how it connected to the World Series doing that. Just interesting that Princess Diana died in 1997, the last time there was 2 ties in the NFL. And one of the ties even happened in London, in the London game. You know, London, England, think about it. London, England equals 131. Prince Charles equals 131. Super Bowl equals 131. Anyway, in this Dolphins-Bengals game, Miami lost and they became 1-3 after this game, reminding us of that 13 number, Tannehill going out after the 13th game, Dan Marino wearing number 13. They also became 16-6 all-time against the Bengals. This is a huge number that is connected to my uncle giving me the Miami Dolphins jersey this year, and I found out at the gold slipper that equals 166. My uncle's name equals 166. He's married to Betty. His name's Barney. Thinking about the Flintstones that only had 166 episodes, named after, they were based off of the TV show of the Honeymooners. Honeymooners equals 166. And it gets even better because, yeah, I'll say that at the very end, but I even found out my uncle's birthday, and when I found it out, it happened to be 166 days after his birthday. Anyway, the story also came on 1-4 about this new New York train wreck. 1-4 or 4-1, Super Bowl the small way equals 41. It was 32 days before the Super Bowl. NFL equals 32. The date numerology was 42. If you write out 42, it equals 142, just like Miami Dolphins. Hoboken equals 70 in Gematria, just like Miami Dolphins the small way. But I also pointed out Giants equals 70, Falcons equals 70, and Seattle Seahawks equals 70. Which, interesting too, talked about how it's connected through Seattle because the Dolphins lost 10-12 on the first game of the season to Seattle. And when we found out that the Colts and the Vikings weren't going to be in the Super Bowl, the Houston Texans won their division with a score of 10-12. And Dan Marino was in the Simpsons episode, Season 10, Episode 12. And 10 months, 12 days, a lot of times is also 318 days. Just all super synced up. The Hoboken train wreck was 97 days before this train wreck in New York. Dolphins equal 97. We're in the 97th season of the NFL. I also pointed out how the Hoboken train wreck was synced to the 2005 MLB season. And in 2005, Alabama's coach Nick Saban coached the Dolphins to a 9-7 record. And how all of the Nebraska Cornhusker stuff sinks into there. I talked about Mike Riley. All of this Miami stuff I started talking about is in regards to Super Bowl V that was played in Miami. It was the Cowboys versus the Colts. And it was 17 days after the college football championship that year, Nebraska beating LSU in 1971. 17 days later was the Super Bowl. They were both in Miami at the Orange Bowl. But the next year, Nebraska won back-to-back championships. The next year they beat Alabama in the championship. And Mike Riley, Nebraska's current coach, was on that football team for Alabama. So just interesting, we have Alabama going for back-to-back championships. Clemson equals 27, Miami equals 27. The college national football championship is going to be 27 days before the Super Bowl. So in regards to ties then, the two teams that tied this year was the Bengals tied the Redskins and the Seahawks tied the Cardinals the week before. So I thought, how interesting. When I looked back in regards to the 2005 with baseball, a Chicago team won, and then the Cubs ended up winning the World Series. So I thought, I wonder who won the Super Bowl that year when there was two ties. It was the Broncos who beat the Packers in the Super Bowl. So obviously it wasn't for the Broncos. And I thought possibly they're showing us the Packers at least being in the Super Bowl because of that. But then, in regards to baseball and all the interrelatedness, the Miami Marlins beat the Cleveland Indians in the World Series that year. And on Game 7, the Dolphins were going to play the Bears, and that game had to be moved. Well, it says back a day, but to me it's up a day. It had to be moved to Monday instead of being on Sunday. So, just kind of funny in regards to that. A Miami team won that year. And think about Back to the Future, where the Cubs sweep Miami and whatnot. I've talked about this previously. It's just funny. The last time that there were two ties in the NFL, the Indians lost in Game 7 of the World Series. And then in 1997, there was two ties in the NFL, and the Indians lost in Game 7 of the World Series. It also talks about how this was the year that the Houston Oilers left to go to Tennessee. And the Super Bowl is going to be held in Houston this year. Another interesting thing, this game then, when it got moved to Monday night, it ended up going to overtime, 33-33. The master teacher number, the highest degree in Scottish Rite Freemasonry, 33-33. And the Bears ended up winning this game, 36-33. The Bears became 1-7, and I've talked about all this 13-17 symbolism in regards to Tannehill and Dan Marino. Tannehill wears number 17, whatever. Miami became 5-3. If you write out Super Bowl LI, the small way equals 53. The other game, though, that was scheduled on the Monday night was the Patriots and the Packers. So just something interesting to think about. The Patriots lost by 18 points. And their record became 5-3, just like the Dolphins' record that year. Another thing I forgot to point out was the fact that in the World Series that went back to 2005, when Houston beat Cincinnati, or they tied Cincinnati, how interesting it is that the Cincinnati Bengals were involved in the tie in the NFL as well. Cincinnati and Gematria equals 51. I'm sure there's probably some connection to the death of Harambe in all of this as well. The first tie since the new rules in 2012, the first tie was against the Rams and the 49ers, which was also a big deal this year. I've talked about in the previous video how the only team that the 49ers beat this year was against the Rams. They beat them twice. All kinds of stuff in regards to the Ram symbolism. I also forgot to point out in regards to Mariah Carey singing at the national anthem was that the Patriots beat the Rams that year just after 9/11 in the World Series. A whole lot more. Like I said, I'll leave links in the description. If you write out the word ties, because there was multiple ties in the NFL, it equals 53. Of course, 53 always equals 318. So ties equal 53 like Super Bowl LI. Interesting too, I talked about how it was in the London game, the Bengals versus the Redskins. The Dolphins beat the Redskins and the 72 Dolphins or whatever. And of course all of the Redskin stuff goes back to Brandon Scherf in the area that I live in. But ties in Jewish gematria equals 204, just like London. I was also thinking in regards to 2005, and that was the year of the London attacks on 7/7 of 2005, so it's even 777. 2 plus 5 is 7. London's located on 51 degrees north, syncing up with Super Bowl 51. There's also been all kinds of 9/11 symbolism going on this year. Just absolutely tons of it. You had Hillary Clinton collapsing on 9/11, a plane crash in Reno, Nevada on 9/11, Donald Trump winning the election on 11/9 or 9/11. Anyway, just in regards to that really quick, I was scrolling through movies that were set in Miami, and one of them was just so happened to be Reno 911 Miami. It's the only movie that they made off of this TV show, Reno 911 Miami. Doesn't it just seem kind of odd that they would make just a Miami version, not like a New York and other, whatever, Seattle, Los Angeles or something? Reno 911 Miami seems pretty strange. And especially with all the Reno stuff that I've talked about. And, Donald Trump having to be evacuated in Reno. Reno is where Colin Kaepernick played college football. We had the death of Janet Reno in Miami this year. I even showed a lot of 9/11 symbolism just within Reno because it was named after Jesse Reno, who equals 110, and he died on the 110th day of the year. The World Trade Centers were 110 stories tall. There's even a highway by the Pentagon called it's Highway 110. Miami, Florida, the big way, equals 110 in gematria. President equals 110 in gematria. Lots of interesting things. And why I'm on the Reno, Nevada kick again? I forgot to mention something in regards to Janet Jackson. So all of the stuff in regards to Janet Jackson having the kid at age 50 with the whole boob thing, before it happened, when she came out, she was singing the songs Rhythm Nation and also a song called The Knowledge before Justin Timberlake came out. And both of them songs came off of this album right here, Rhythm Nation 1814. And the reason that 1814 is so significant, and that is even why she claims that she used that number in the song or the album title, is because that's the year that Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem. And then people even pointed out that the R in rhythm and the N in nation are the 18th and the 14th letter, but Janet Jackson just said that was a coincidence. And there's all this stuff in regards to 88 that syncs up to the national anthem and whatever. So wardrobe malfunction equals 88. The Star Spangled Banner equals 88. It was inspired by the Great Garrison flag that equals 88 in gematria. It was written in the Battle of Baltimore. Baltimore is in Maryland. Maryland, one of two states that equals 88. Trump equals 88. Talk about this year will be the 88th anniversary of the stock market crash. The 88th year of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The music for the national anthem was made by this guy, John Stafford Smith. His name with the S exception equals 88. The Star Spangled Banner wasn't officially the national anthem until it was signed by Herbert Hoover, HH. H is the 8th letter, 88. Even the Battle of Baltimore, and this is where Francis Scott Key supposedly wrote the national anthem. It began on September 12th, 9/12. Super Bowl LI equals 912 in gematria. Seems to all be synced up to that. I mean, there's more going on with this. Like I said, I'll leave a link to my blog in the description. You can come read some of that stuff. But in regards to the stuff I was talking about with London and the 777 attacks, remember how I mentioned the only other jerseys that I have of the Dolphins are Chad Henne, number 7, and Jake Long, number 77. 777, possibly nothing at all, but it just really makes me wonder. In regards to the NFL ties then this year, in the article that I was reading, they only showed one tweet, and it even had this guy tweeting, and he has 10, whatever this is, 10, I don't know, I can't remember what it is on Twitter, retweets, 12 favorites or likes, 10 and 12. Janet Jackson announced she was going to have a kid on 10/12 this year. All of the 10/12 stuff, it syncs back up to 318, Dan Marino's Super Simpsons episode. They even mentioned how Marvin Lewis, the coach of the Bengals, he tied Bart Starr with 3 or more ties. Bart Starr, of course, synced up to the Packers. And the star symbolism, star could be something to do with the Dallas Cowboys. I also pointed out that the Bengals also had a tie against the Panthers on 10-12 of 2014. So they're making a big deal about the Bengals tying, and one of the big deals in the Major League Baseball was that the last tie was also in 2005 that involved Cincinnati as well. One last thing I put in this post was that I noticed that if you write out 75, it equals the same as Super Bowl LI, 53 and 152. And if you write out Carolina Panthers, it equals 75, Cincinnati Bengals equals 75, Minnesota Vikings equals 75, Indianapolis Colts equals 75, Arizona Cardinals equals 75, Baltimore Ravens 75, Jacksonville Jaguars 75, and none of them teams even made the playoffs. So just kind of interesting that 75 seems to be a number synced up to the Super Bowl this year, and not one of the teams that equals 75 even made the playoffs. So hopefully that made sense. I'm going to move on to a different post. I know I should make these more individual posts, but I don't have enough time a lot of times lately, so I'm just cramming all this information into one video. You can pause it, do whatever. You can come back and re-listen to it. I'll try to leave bookmarks. I'll listen to it and leave bookmarks to help out a little bit. So we also got this other story about the New York Giants wide receivers going to celebrate on a boat in Miami, which of course reminds us of Jose Fernandez dying on the boat. You know, just interesting, just another Miami story. What is the purpose? Are they showing us Miami in the Super Bowl? Or is just all of it stemming to Miami and it's synced up to who the true team is going to be? But New York Giants receivers in Gematria equals 114, just like Ty. So possibly it's all for them. You know, front and center is the 13 that I've mentioned a whole lot. Dan Marino's number. Before the Giants went and did this, the reason they did this was because they beat the Redskins. You know, so once again, interesting to the Native American theme. The Dolphins played the Redskins. The 72 Dolphins played the Redskins. The Redskins also beat Miami in Super Bowl 17. And I believe Miami even scored 17 points in that game. And for whatever the reason, I started thinking about Will Smith in regards to his song Miami. And we had the New Orleans Saint player named Will Smith die last year. And it was, you know, super synced up even with the death of Prince. But I noticed that this song, Miami by Will Smith, is also 3 minutes, 18 seconds long. It also came out in 97, thinking about the tie symbolism. Even thinking about the movie Focus, too. The movie Focus, he goes to New Orleans or whatever, and he programs the one guy to see 55 or whatever it was. I can't remember. It's been a while since I watched it. But, you know, just interesting. Will Smith been in a lot of things in regards to the NFL. The movie Concussion. He was even Ali, you know, and the death of Muhammad Ali was super synced up to what's been going on. And that movie, I believe, was even set in Miami. Or it was, at least according to what Wikipedia says. It says it was set in Miami if you look it up. The Dolphins are playing the Saints next year in London as well. So who knows? You know, it's something to think about. Will Smith is the Fresh Prince. The Super Bowl is going to be played on Queen Elizabeth's 60th anniversary being the Queen in London because of the time difference. It'll be on February 6th, not February 5th there. Her 65th anniversary, Prince equals 65. Miami, Florida equals 65. Talked about Philadelphia equals 65 and how it syncs up to the Key of David and Pope Francis's visit to the United States last year. It's funny, too, in the media, we're getting all these stories about Queen Elizabeth. You know, she has the heavy cold for how many days. She didn't go to Christmas Eve or Christmas, or she missed, New Year's Day. And then we just got a story just the other day about how she almost got shot because she was walking around outside or whatever. They're just toying with us in regards to her death and whatnot. Something that I've been talking about for a long time. I wonder if it's going to be when she's 91 years old. There's lots of things that seem to sync up to her being 91, I thought. because I talked a lot about how 91 has seemed to be an elimination type number, or at least it was in the year 2015. Like even Cameron Wake of the Miami Dolphins, number 91, tore his Achilles and whatnot. And, a whole lot more with 91. But the Cubs did win, and they equaled 91, Chicago Cubs, so who knows? This song, Miami, was on Big Willie style that equals 70, like Miami Dolphins, Giants, Seahawks, whatever. Or Seattle Seahawks. The first ever London game that was played was the Giants versus Miami. The Giants won 13-10. So interesting. 10 even equals 39. New York equals 39. Empire equals 39. Just super connected. So how funny that the Dolphins had 10 points. It even says this song, Miami, made it all the way up to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. Charted at number 17. A big number I've talked about, 13 and 17 in regards to the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, he was even born exactly 7 years after Dan Marino. September 15th, 1968. So just interesting. Janet Reno, if you read out her full name, it equals 159, a lot like that date, 15/9. She died age 78, was the 78th Attorney General. If you read out 78, it equals 159. She also died 3 months, 18 days after her birthday, which is also a span of 110 days. Miami, Florida equals 110, and that's where she died. So she's super significant into what has been going on with the Miami coding, whether it's for the Dolphins. I also made a video, I'll leave in the description, about the death of Pat Tillman, and think about that in regards to not standing during the national anthem and whatnot. Patrick Tillman equals 159 in Gematria, and Super Bowl 38 and 39 were super synced up to his death and whatnot. The Patriots won before and after he died, the year before, the year after. Pat Tillman equals 118, and his final game played in the NFL was 118 days after 9/11. I also got pointed out in the comments here that Billy Joel has a song called Miami 2017. I didn't look enough into it yet. I have plans to look into it. But what's interesting is that when you think about him, and then we had the death of George Michael, possibly nothing. Just whenever I think of Billy Joel, I think of Elton John as well. And Elton John was all super butthurt over the death of George Michael and whatnot. So, like I said, there's more to think about with that. I need to look more into it. Let's just keep on moving here. So, this is where I talked about the Dolphins and possibly the Packers in the Super Bowl. Or, maybe it's just for the Packers and the Chiefs, the Alpha, the Omega, the first and the last. Somebody had pointed out all these connections to the Miami Dolphins and the Packers. The last time they even played was on 10/12 of the year 2014. And once again, I mentioned that. The total score even summed to 51. We're going to the Super Bowl 51. They even mentioned, if you look at the all-time record, the Dolphins lead the Packers 4-10. If they were to meet in the Super Bowl with the Packers winning, the record would be 5-10, a lot like 51, which is interesting. And there's other interesting things in here. Hopefully you can read that. I'm going to move on, though. But I also pointed out if the Dolphins win, they would be 11-4 all-time, syncing up to tie that I was talking about, the tie symbolism. But then I go on to mention, and it is something that I've truly wondered since, the beginning of the season, at least with the Packers, because a lot of the stuff that was in regards to the death of Sam Foltz was connected to the Packers, and a lot of this interrelated stuff that was going on. So Samuel Foltz in Gematria equals 150, just like Green Bay Packers, just like Lincoln, Nebraska, where the Cornhuskers play. I even talked about the Ben Franklin Bridge, and it was opened on the 150th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, or that's what it was in honor for. And it was built by a guy named Ralph Majewski. And I'll get more into Ralph here in a minute, because Ralph is synced up to the Flintstones. It's connected to my uncle, my cousin. But Sam Foltz and Mike Sadler died in Wisconsin. Dwayne Wade went to Marquette, which is in Wisconsin. That's also where Tommy Boy went. And Tommy Boy was synced up to all kinds of stuff I talked about in the beginning. They showed the 239 on the American History book. Last year, we're in the 239th year of the United States. That's what a lot of the, Nebraska stuff started being. All kinds of stuff with Tommy Boy. You know, Herbie Hancock, Nebraska's mascot's Herbie. They were the first team to play Penn State after the Jerry Sandusky stuff. Tommy Boy's set in Sandusky, Ohio. But, so we got Dwayne Wade went to Marquette. We had the story of his cousin being murdered. Colin Kaepernick, born in Milwaukee, so Wisconsin. J.J. Watt from Wisconsin. We found out he is out for the rest of the season. Interesting, too, you know, Sue of the Dolphins, connecting to the Nebraska Cornhuskers, is also now the highest paid defensive player. He beat out J.J. Watt. Wisconsin defeated LSU, Michigan State, Nebraska this year. And then were the three teams that were involved in that car accident. Then the Packers were the team that the 49ers were playing when Kaepernick didn't stand for the national anthem. I talked about all the royal themes, and in the movie King Ralph, he's wearing a Packers jacket and a Cubs hat. And, you know, King Ralph, and then John Goodman's also in the movie The Big Lebowski, and the inside joke is that they always go to Ralph's. And at the very beginning of the movie, he even signs the check 9/11 or whatever at Ralph's. And earlier this year, we had the death of David Huddleston. At the end of The Big Lebowski, Donnie dies, thinking about Donald Trump and lots of things foreshadowing a possible assassination. So we got John Goodman and King Ralph. They go to Ralph's. I'll get to that in a little bit. But in regards to Wisconsin and the Packers, we also had the movie War Dogs come out. It's super connected to Miami, set in Miami, or for the majority of it. And it was connected to the Packers. I made a video on that as well. The guy's name was David Pacos, and the Packers won the Super Bowl the year that happened and whatnot. Now they're making a movie on it. I also wondered about Zachary K. Hubbard's house and how there was possibly this just happens. It's how this weird happens, but everyone's talking about the G on the insulation. Well, it was like the green G, right? I can't remember what the company was, but it just makes me think of the Green Bay Packers, the big G and then the color green. You know, just nothing even seems that strange anymore in doing this. It seems like some of these things happen just for somebody else to see it, or, for us to figure it out. So I guess the reason why that also sticks out is because the big deal with that, it seemed like everyone was so worried about the Colts not making the playoffs, so just makes me wonder. John Goodman, though, the reason John Goodman really sticks out is because he talked about my uncle, Betty, and his married to Barney, talked about my mom's missing cat, and how that connected to their house and whatnot. John Goodman also plays Fred Flintstone in that 1994 movie. And Fred Flintstone is based off of Ralph Cramden. So Fred Flintstone based off of Ralph. John Goodman is King Ralph. The Big Lebowski that he's in, they go to Ralph's. I made a couple videos in regards to some Ralph theme that I kept noticing. I even talked about the Comedy Central roast of Rob Lowe that happened on 9/5 that was synced up to My Life as well, it seemed. And it had Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid, come out of nowhere, and he's on that roast. And 9/5 2 seasons ago was also the first game of the Nebraska Cornhuskers that Dwayne Wade ever attended. Also in the Flintstones movie, if you look it up, it says that it was Elizabeth Taylor's final theatrical appearance. And think about her in regards to being Carrie Fisher's stepmom. Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, her and her mom both die. King Ralph equals 51 in Gematria. If you write out John Stephen Goodman, it equals 203. And 203 is that special number that if you write out 318, it equals 203. He's also mostly known for being Dan Connor on Roseanne. Talked about the Dan symbolism that I've been talking about in regards to the lions and Daniel in the lion's den and the tribe of Dan and Samson killing the lion. Also, Dan Marino. I'm not going to play this clip here. Well, maybe I'll play a tiny bit of it. But when I was trying to research some stuff the other day, it wouldn't let me. And now it's not going to even load this, but well, I'm not even going to play it. Basically, I went back to my old King Ralph post and whatnot because I wanted to see the picture of him wearing the Packers jacket and the Cubs hat, and then we had the Cubs win the World Series. It would load every single picture. Even when I refreshed the page, it would load every single picture but that one picture that I was trying to see in regards to that. And possibly it's just my internet being weird, but it's just weird that I kept refreshing the page. It would never load that picture at all. So it was almost like it didn't want me to see that picture, or it wanted me to think about that picture. But the movie King Ralph came out on 15/2. Super Bowl LI equals 152 in simple gematria. He even falls in love with the girl named Camille in this movie. And then, Prince Charles is married to Camilla. So anyway, I'm going to finish this video in my truck because a bunch of people came over and it's just my house is too small. I can't finish this video in there. It's too loud. But another thing I noticed in regards to Fred Flintstone was that the guy who played him died on June 14th, which in a leap year is the 166th day. So he didn't really die on the 166th day, but still interesting. It's Donald Trump's birthday. He died on Donald Trump's 31st birthday. And, I talked about all the Key of David stuff with Donald Trump and Pope Francis's 1,189th day being on Donald Trump's 70th birthday this year. In the Flintstones, if you look up the Flintstones, the professional team there is the Bedrock Brontos, and their rival is the Rock Bay Pachyderms. And what's interesting, Bedrock Brontos is a play on Denver Broncos, and the Rock Bay Pachyderms is a play on the Green Bay Packers. And in '97, the year there was the tie, the Super Bowl ended up being the Broncos beating the Packers. So just interesting how it's all interrelated and connects to my uncle. I also noticed on the Flintstones there's an episode called Dripper, which is a play on Flipper that I talked about in regards to the Dolphins and people thinking it was going to be the Colts and the Vikings. And this episode came out on March 18th, 318. And I started thinking about all the Jesus symbolism in regards to the 318. And I remembered clear back on one of the Halloweens, I was Jesus for Halloween. I made this big old cross out of wood and whatnot. And I went to the bar with my cousin Timmy right here, and he's dressed up as Fred Flintstone. And I thought, how interesting, What are the odds of that? I go as Jesus for Halloween, and the person I go to the bar with is Fred Flintstone. I also talked about how randomly I thought of my best friend's brother's death, and I talked about my cousin who was involved in that and the one who ran for help. It was actually this cousin right here. And this was actually on Halloween of 2010. It had a date numerology of 51, although the party actually began on the 30th. So it would have been a date numerology of 50, but it was after midnight when we left the bar, so technically, kind of goes hand in hand. I also noticed that I'm 1,209 days older than this cousin here, and he was born on 3/3 of the year 86, so remember L is the 12th letter, I the 9th letter, a lot like 12 and 9. Even says on Facebook he's been a member since 2/5 of 2006, and the Super Bowl this year is on 2/5. He's also a Lions fan. He's the only other Lions fan I know in the entire world, other than my brother, who I talked about. There was some interesting connections with him. We used to go to the bar all the time together, and he would wear his Johnson jersey, the Lions Johnson jersey, and I would wear my Jake Long jersey. That way when we stood together, it said Long Johnson. But anyway, another thing I noticed was that if you write out Green Bay, it equals 77, just like if you write out the word Christ. And of course, the 77th day of the year is March 18th, 318. a lot like 318. I started thinking about all the alpha and omega, the beginning, the end. The Packers won the first Super Bowl. Oblivion hints that the last one will be in Super Bowl 51. And then I thought about maybe bringing in the new age, right? The age of Aquarius, fitting for the Dolphins, and the aqua color. And the Super Bowl 25 will even be played, on February 5th, which is in the zodiac time of Aquarius as well, like the horoscopes or whatever. Begins the 21st of January and it ends on 2/18 this year. Just interesting. This is Sam Foltz's birthday. My name in Gematria even equals 121. Revelation equals 121. In regards to Charles Manson, there's even a TV show that came out in 2015, and the final episode this year was on September 9th. But it's called Aquarius, and it's all about the story of Charles Manson and whatnot. September 10th is the day that leaves 112 days in the year. Houston equals 112, where the Super Bowl is going to be played. So all the Flintstone stuff, and I was thinking about my Uncle Barney, and I finally was like, I'm just going to ask my mom when his birthday is. When I was making this post, I just texted her. Ironically, she was working at the Gold Slipper, where I found out that he was the one who gave me the Dolphins jersey. His name equals the same as the Gold Slipper. They both equal 166. And, just weird. I just randomly asked my mom. I didn't know a clue of what his birthday was. It was 166 days after his birthday. There's also some other interesting things I remember about him. I remember my cousin here, his dad Clancy, told us that Barney quit drinking on 8/8 of the year 88. And I also saw on Facebook that Barney was married on 8/8 of 1980. So, interesting in regards to the 88 connections as well. But anyway, my mom texts me back, half hour later, and she tells me my Uncle Barney's birthday is 7/23 of the 1953. It makes complete sense as to what is going on. 53, Super Bowl LI equals 53. Sam Foltz died on 7/23. It's also the first day of the dog days of summer and the first day of Neptunalia. And I talked about Super Bowl 48 being super connected to Neptune. Also, that's the day that Michael Jordan's dad died 23 years ago. Think about Michael Jordan and the number 23. Michael Jordan came back wearing number 45. Miami equals 45. And the reason all of that fits with Sam Foltz is I talked about all the Teen Wolf stuff. Think about the first day of the dog days of summer. Just a whole bunch of stuff. It was also, this year was my Uncle Barney's 63rd birthday. And if you go back and watch the Michigan State versus Wisconsin game that I posted on YouTube and whatnot, it was all about the number 63. And also the Nebraska versus Wisconsin game was super synced up to the number 63. Just interesting, my uncle would turn 63 on the day that them two guys died. His birthday had a date numerology of 83, like football. He's 29 years older than me, like football the small way. His full name equals 203 the big way. Remember, if you read out 318, it equals 203. I also talked about how it's connected to a bunch of other people of my aunts and uncle, or my uncles at least, and my mom. Barney was born in 53. My Uncle Kelly died age 53. My Uncle Mike died 5 months and 3 days apart from my Uncle Kelly. My mom's right now 53 years old. They grew up in Ralston, Nebraska. That equals 53. N breaks down to 5. U breaks down to 3. 53. Like Nebraska. Nebraska with the S and K exception equals 53. Just some weird stuff, And Fred Flintstone or John Goodman, his full name equals 203. What are the odds of that, And of course, I figured, I wonder what the span is to my birthday from his birthday. Of course, my uncle's birthday is 3 months and 18 days before my birthday. Also 110 days, like Miami, Florida. Then I went on to mention that my cousin Timmy, who's dressed up like Fred Flintstone there, his brother Ryan lives in Miami, or I think it's called Pembroke Pines, which is basically a suburb of Miami. I didn't realize how close it was to the Dolphin Stadium, Hard Rock Stadium and whatnot. But I found that interesting, Pembroke Pines, and there was a bunch of weird stuff that happened to me in regards to the Eustace Mullins book, and it involved this Central Florida train wreck that happened this year, and that train was going to Pembroke, Kentucky. I even put on here that my cousin's name equaled 150 died, reminding us of Dan Marino's birthday, and Janet Reno, and some other things that I talked about earlier in this video. So just a few more things. I thought my uncle, I was like, well, he's not necessarily Fred Flintstone. He is Barney Rubble. So I looked up Barney Rubble. In that movie, he's portrayed by Rick Moranis, right? And I thought, how interesting, because Rick Moranis is the coach on the movie Little Giants. Lots of people talking about the Giants being in the Super Bowl. The Giants are even playing the Cowboys in this. But Rick Moranis is also in a bunch of other stuff like Ghostbusters, where in part 2 they say the end of the world is going to be Valentine's in 2016. He's in Little Shop of Horrors, I think, where they hint that the end of the world is like 9/23, the big day of Pope Francis. And, I don't know. I didn't do enough research into it yet, but I did rewatch this movie. And it's funny, the movie's all about Icebox and whatnot, and then the next day when we got this Fort Lauderdale shooting, and holy cow, my internet goes so much faster out in my truck, I might as well come out here and do stuff. Wow. But anyway, I'll get to the Icebox stuff in a second. Possibly nothing, just kind of interesting. This guy supposedly shot this up. He came from Anchorage, Alaska. Actually, I'll find it and talk about it, because Alaska was bought by this guy, William H. Seward, and it was a $7.2 million deal, whatever, but it was referred to as Seward's Icebox. And also yesterday on CNN, we had these stories about Ice Cube saying that the clowning is over in regards to the Raiders, and we also got a story just above it, iceberg the size of Delaware to break off. So just kind of interesting how that shooting is even connected to Alaska, where you think of ice and cold, and it's even bought because of Seward's Icebox. That's what it was called. And then we got Icebox in the movie The Little Giants that I literally just watched the night before. And I wonder if it just has something to do with how opposite Miami and Alaska are portrayed. Alaska really cold, Miami really humid and hot and whatever. I wonder if there's some type of joke or code within that. But anyway, like I said, this happened 16 miles away from where the Dolphins play on 1/6. Talked about all that earlier. There was 5 people dead even. 5 equals 42 at Gematria. And if you write out 42, it equals 142 like Miami Dolphins. It also reminds me of Super Bowl 5 that basically got me all into following all of this stuff. There was another article on Yahoo that they put in quotes, lost his mind. Lost his mind equals 61 and 142. The shooter's name had identical gematria to Super Bowl LI. Esteban Santiago, 53 and 152, just like Super Bowl LI. He even told FBI agents in Alaska that the government was controlling his mind and forcing him to watch Islamic State group videos. How interesting they would mention that. He also came from Anchorage, Alaska on a Delta flight. Can't remember what I was going to talk about there. Maybe I wrote it farther down. It happened at Terminal 2 at the airport. Terminal 2 equals 51, just like Super Bowl 51. And also 150 the big way. Green Bay Packers equal 150. It also, the first reporting of the shooting happened at 12:55 p.m., which is 5 minutes until 1, 5 till 1, 51. The initials of the guy, the shooter, Esteban Santiago, E is the 5th letter, S the first letter, 51. It even says that the airport originally opened as Merle Fogg Airport on 5/1 of the year 29. Football equals 29 the small way, 5/1. I also noticed that it was Ndamukong Suh's 30th birthday yesterday, and it was 30 days before the Super Bowl. So, very interesting. They also had this video on CNN interviewing this girl in the Michigan shirt. And I know Michigan just played in the Orange Bowl, but it's all connected to all these interrelated stories I've been talking about, and I'll explain it here in a second. But Michigan Wolverines in gematria equals 142, just like Miami Dolphins. I also found this guy right here, Asante Samuel, and he's a former NFL player, and he was actually born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and it was his birthday as well. He turned 35 years old. Tom Brady in gematria equals 35. This guy won Super Bowl 38 and 39 with the Patriots. Remember, too, though, if you write out 35, it equals 142 like Miami Dolphins. Also, in Week 17, the Patriots beat the Dolphins, and the Patriots scored 35 points. But this guy also went to Central Florida for college, and that's where Scott Frost, the former Nebraska Cornhusker, is the coach of. And Scott Frost is, I know him from beating Tennessee in the Orange Bowl in 1997. Nebraska even scored 42 points. I'm a Michigan fan, or I was, as when I was younger, before I knew it was all scripted and everything else. But Nebraska and Michigan had to share the national title that year. Think about that in regards to ties. And what's funny about it, Nebraska beat Tennessee that year, Peyton Manning's Tennessee team. And now this year we have Nebraska playing Tennessee in their bowl game, right? And Michigan played in the Orange Bowl, kind of like a role reversal thing. And it was also in the year 97, the year that I talked about goes back to the last time there was 2 ties in the NFL. We're in the 97th season of the NFL. Dolphins equal 97. It also makes me wonder in regards to the ice box that I was talking about, Scott Frost. You know, possibly nothing. Just interesting. Frost, an ice box. The guy's name, too. His full name, Asante Samuel, equals 131 the big way, like Super Bowl. Samuel is something I've talked about in regards to judges in the Bible. Sam Foltz, whatever. Samuel equals 71. Nebraska equals 71. Moses equals 71. The 10 Commandments equals 71. And Sam Foltz's death was connected to Lawrence Phillips, who died the same day that Obama was in Nebraska giving the speech at UNO. But Lawrence Phillips also played on the same team as Scott Frost. And Lawrence Phillips even beat up Scott Frost's girlfriend. So, pretty interesting how all of these interrelate. And of course, you know, Sue is from Nebraska. It seems like it's all that this little piece of it and all of the national anthem stuff, it all seems like it's synced up to the Patriots, unfortunately. But, you know, who really knows? In my head, and like I said, possibly I'm wrong. I'll eventually piece it all together, but in my head, it seems like it's going to be like either the Dolphins versus the Giants or the Packers in the Super Bowl. But, you know, we'll see. I'm only making these videos to get the information out so we can piece it all together and we can all eventually learn more and get better at this and figure out how it's being done every single time. I've said this multiple times. So don't quote me on it being what I say. I'm showing information and trying to, that will eventually lead us to be able to perfect the system, you know? I think that's what everybody should be doing because nobody has it perfected. But it's very obvious that it is scripted. But there's something missing to all of the puzzles a lot of times. Or, you know, sometimes, yeah, there's just something missing, I guess. There's something that's always missing that pieces it all together, that makes it all make sense, and why they show you so many things that are going on. It's just kind of funny. I've been really on this Miami kick, and then now we get a kid shooting up the airport in Miami. I'm pretty spot on with what I'm talking about, even if I don't get exactly what the point is. It seems like I've been pretty spot on for the last year, and whatever, you know. But I gotta leave it at that. It's like I'm getting really cold out in this truck. I think that's all I wanted to talk about. I'll try to leave some notes or whatever, tags to help you maybe understand the different parts of this video. But yeah, peace.